Our process in doing due diligence for investment opportunities, we start with product and then the brand and then the talent as in the people running a company before we even think about celebrity who's involved, right? It's sort of, is the product novel? Does it have a reason for being out there? Is it a copycat or is it something new that's actually solving a problem? Is the brand well thought out? Has the founder or the team running the company thought through how the brand connects with consumers, how the brand is perceived by the outside world, who is actually running the company? All of those, that's the tertiary consideration for us.
Welcome to Brands for a Better World, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the people and products building a more just, healthy, and regenerative future for us all. Tune in weekly, and together, we'll learn about why these better products and brands were created, how they're helping fix broken systems, and what you can do to support them. My hope is that you'll discover some new brands to love and get some sparks of inspiration that will help you live your best life. Hi, I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow to scale their impact. If you like this show, please help it grow by leaving ratings and reviews on your podcast app and by sharing your favorite episodes with your friends. Maybe this will be one of them. On this episode, I'm speaking with Samyr Laine, managing partner of Freedom Trail Capital, about the inequities in venture capital, his criteria for making sure an investor and brand are a good fit, the growing trend of celebrities launching or investing in consumer brands, and some of the brands his fund is invested in. We then wrap up with a rapid round question segment. Enjoy.
Hey, I'm Samyr Laine, founder and managing partner of Freedom Trail Capital. I'm an operator turned investor, but our fund, our VC fund as a whole, we look to invest in consumer companies and brands at the intersection of culture, lifestyle, and influence. My sweet spot and our fund sweet spot is companies and consumer companies that have a person of influence in the mix. So talent, celebrity, athlete, musician, influencer, podcaster, all of the above.
Nice. That's awesome. And it's good timing on that because I've been seeing that sector of brands blowing up lately, whether it's just celebrities coming on as an endorser or whether it's celebrities co-founding businesses or influencers jumping in and using their big YouTube following to launch a line of products or a chain of restaurants or something. So, it's big time. So you hit the market right. But
very timely. And it also, thankfully for online, just coincides with the experience I've had working with pretty A-list celebrity and talent, having helped them build consumer brands and products. But you do have this perfect storm of influencers and podcasters and YouTube personalities with athletes, actors, musicians building their own brands. And so it's good for us on the VC fund side because we've got tremendous deal flow and great companies out there.
That's great. And we'll dive into what your portfolio looks like a little bit more later, but let's just start with the capital in general. Like right now in the CPG market, pretty much every week I'm seeing, 5 brands talking about how difficult it is right now to get funding or how, capital's tight in general right now, or you're seeing grocery stores shut down, you're seeing brands shut down because they couldn't get enough money or whatever. There's lots of just challenges with capital, but put that aside, it's always been challenging for some people to get access to capital, right? It's the inequity in the access to capital. It's mostly going to white male founders, right? So there's that problem to solve too. So I'm curious, I know you're out here trying to build things in a different way. So what problems are you trying to solve and how are you solving those?
I think it's twofold on our end. And look, I'll echo the sentiment that it's difficult to get capital. We're actively raising our fund at the moment. And I haven't met one investor who hasn't said that it's the toughest fundraising environment they've seen for entrepreneurs and for VC funds alike. So it's tough. But on our end as a fund, I think we're trying to approach it from multiple angles. I think first is trying to empower diverse entrepreneurs. And it doesn't mean that our exclusive focus on a fund with our fund is investing only in diverse founders. But what we do is make sure that we're making ourselves available, right? Because to your point, it's 1% of venture capital dollars are going to Black entrepreneurs. Less than 1% is going to Black women. If you just look at all women, it's still below 3%. And it's just such a dismal landscape. And so for us, the one thing that we pride ourselves on is giving everyone, particularly diverse founders, more than just a time of day, right? And so it might not be a fit for our thesis, but let's talk. We might do our due diligence, we might pass on the investment opportunity, but let me pass you on to someone else who might be able to help you. Or if we're just here to impart knowledge, let me at least give you my view of the landscape in your company, and so on and so forth. And so a lot of times what you find is, it's just tough to get attention from investors nowadays, especially investors who do have capital to make investment decisions. And so for us, the first thing is making ourselves available to impart knowledge, to invest for sure, or anything else, right? So right now we've got 14 investments that we've done. 13 are from diverse founders, right? Either Black, brown, BIPOC, or female-led businesses. And again, that's not our exclusive focus, but for us, a lot of it is you just find great entrepreneurs in people who don't typically get to have a conversation with an investor or venture capital. And a lot of it just happens to do with folks going with what they know, right? Like a lot of the VC landscape, it happens to be white males who are doing the investing. And so they invest, like is attracted to like to some extent. And so for us, a lot of it really is, cool, you got a great business, probably not a fit for us. Let's talk. Let me learn more. I might have someone who I can connect you to, or here's what I think, or here's how I would tweak your pitch or your pitch deck or anything like that. So that's the one side. And the other side is even on the LP front, right? Like people who have capital that they're looking to invest potentially into venture funds aren't getting invitations to invest into venture funds, right? And so kind of like our investing in the consumer companies that we invest in, it doesn't mean that our entire LP base is going to be diverse. It's almost impossible for the fund. It actually probably is impossible for a fund of our size. But we're reaching out to diverse investors, women, Black, brown, who might not even know about venture capital, might not understand venture capital, and saying, hey, we've got a venture fund. Here's what we're looking at. Here's what venture capital is. Do you want to have a conversation about being an LP potentially, right? And so I think we're trying to approach it from both perspectives, because typically the folks on Sand Hill Road, you're not even sniffing any of those VC funds unless you've got $1 million check, probably way more, to be honest. And a lot of times those diverse communities don't know that it's out there, right? They don't know venture as an asset class. Stock market and the Wall Street, and a lot of times you're even turned off by that, real estate, a few other things. So yeah, we just love to inform people and be transparent. And that's on both sides, right? We're talking to entrepreneurs about their businesses. We're talking to LPs about our fund. A lot of it is trying to just relay what the landscape looks like and what we're doing, what we're building, but for entrepreneurs, what they should be focusing on.
I love that. Yeah, because when you're running a smaller business like I am, like I just don't have the time to work with every brand I would love to work with, right? But what I can do is things like this podcast, like help them get inspiration, advice, and knowledge and resources so that they can do some things on their own or connect with the right people. I also, like you said, just take phone calls whenever I can and offer advice so that I can point them in the right direction, even if it's not a fit for us to work together right now. So I love that. That angle too, that a lot of people don't talk about, is we do have this valuable resource of knowledge, experience, and connections that we can share fairly easily. We just have to be willing to do so. So I appreciate that a big part of your focus is just having those conversations, connecting the dots, letting people know that this type of fund exists. Because like you said, maybe even until crowdfunding, I thought I would never even get a chance to enter into an investment world outside of my own businesses, right? Because I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars sitting around. But with crowdfunding, anyone can pop in for $1,000, $100, $10,000, whatever you do have. You could put a little money into some businesses. So going out and letting people know that there are different ways to invest in different types of funds that maybe they'll feel better about investing in. I think it's great.
That's exactly right.
And then, of course, with your operator experience and your VC knowledge, you probably have tons of great advice you can offer brands to help them become more investable too, right? So maybe right now is not the right time, but maybe in a couple of years, it will be the right time. So you having that conversation up front will get them the tools they need to get to a place where they can work with you. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And you hit the nail on the head, right? It's knowledge, expertise, and connections. I spoke to a founder. We're doing due diligence with her company.
But she asked about intros, and I said, great, I'll send some intros, I'll send some emails. And she said, what do I owe you? I was like, you don't owe me anything. It doesn't, right? For me to connect dots, it's mutually beneficial for whoever I'm connecting it to. I just like to pay it forward. It takes 2 seconds to send an email. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer because you've got to remember and send it. But for me to pass along knowledge, expertise, or connections is sometimes priceless for the people you're helping, and it doesn't really cost me anything. But it's very, very interesting. And then to your point, it's true. It might not be investable for us now. It might not be a right fit for us now, but maybe it's the right fit for someone else who invests a little bit early or a little bit later, or is looking for something different than I'm looking for at the time. And so those connections are just a way to pay it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do feel like there's a quote that one of my friends in my professional association used to tell me. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. And it was just kind of like the connections idea around, like, it's partly branding, like, how are you representing yourself in the world to facilitate those connections without your work, right? Like by which I mean, everyone knows me as like the impact brand and packaging guy. So they just send those opportunities to me. They make those connections to me. And when I know somebody for being the ethical investor guy or something like that, then I'm going to make connections, right? So opening those doors, I think, is powerful because it's like part of manifesting, right? If you don't know who you are and what opportunities you want, people aren't going to send them to you. But B, if you don't ask for what you need or open the doors for other people and introduce them to things they didn't know they needed, then how are they going to find it, right? So I like this kind of connections and opening doors type of avenue because it is so powerful. It's helped me in so many ways in my career, and I've seen it help other people when all it took for you is to make an email introduction. Next thing you know, they've got a new business partner and they've got a new investor, they've got a new something like that can really change their game.
Yeah. No, I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better. And it's true, right? It's who, and now I've even see that myself, right? We've launched this fund. We are actively fundraising, but anytime someone has a deal that is talent adjacent or in that vicinity, or a company that could benefit from having talent down the line, it comes my way, right? And so, but that's tremendous because it means we're getting great opportunities that we might not have known about otherwise, but people are thinking of us because hopefully we've connected enough dots or paid it forward enough that a lot of things are coming back our way.
That's great too. Yeah, the kind of almost like karma, right? It's like you put enough good stuff out in the world, then that stuff might come back for you as well.
That's it.
So speaking of the problem you're solving around inequitable access to capital, I've had interviewed brands who are women-owned certified, for example, and one of the benefits they mention is that through that network, there's a lot of support for women entrepreneurs to try to get access to opportunities or funds or even the knowledge on how to pitch better or something like that. So, and then I'm working with Naturally Network on their minority-owned fellowship to do a series of podcasts with some of the people who've gone through that program. And I'm sure they're making some connections for those folks too. But one thing that just popped into my mind is I don't know if there's like a certification for minority-owned. I think that fellowship's the only thing I know that was like sort of official. Like they have to vet you before you go through that to make sure you are officially the owner and operator. Yeah. With that said, do you know of a way or a network or a professional association or something like that that's built around minority owned that does give people access to opportunities or education?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are a few. I know that you can get, I don't know if it's like a certification or where it comes from. You can get like an MBE stamp, right? Like Minority Business Enterprise. And so in some instances, now that comes from the government itself. I don't know how many dots they're connecting behind the scenes, but I have seen and heard that folks who have that Minority Business Enterprise or the MBE stamp, there are investors who are looking for it, and sometimes there are business partners who are looking to do deals with MBE stamp businesses and so on. But it's a great question. It's a good question because I think at some point, they're not like necessarily minority business entrepreneur organizations. They're more organizations for business professionals as a whole. And then the entrepreneur piece is a carve out of it, right? So you get minority business professionals who are connecting, and then you've got a subset of they're entrepreneurs in a particular space. I've seen in particular like categories, right? I've seen Pronghorn is an entity in the spirit space, is kind of somewhat funded by Diageo, that is looking to increase Black wealth and ownership in the spirit space as a whole, right? So they do a good job of connecting dots, educating, and so on and so forth. And then there's a few others, right? Like I've seen Afrotech, which is very tech specific. Again, not necessarily entrepreneur focused. Right. It's more for folks in that space, but it's a good point, cool. Right? I think it's something that someone needs to think about.
Yeah, I'll take a look at both those. And I had heard of the kind of government certification or whatever you can get mostly to apply for government. Not grants per se, but maybe grants as well, but like government funds, government projects, right?
Yeah, I haven't applied for or been a part of an entity applying for it myself, but yeah, if you get an MBE, I'm not sure if it's a stamp or certificate, but yeah, minority business enterprise, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I went through the 10,000 Small Businesses program, which is like a business accelerator for small business entrepreneurs. And that was one of the things I heard about from multiple people in that group is if you do any work with the government, getting those kind of the MBE or the women owned or some other kind of stamp is really powerful because they're trying to diversify their supply chain and get more get more variety of types of businesses they're supporting. So having those things helps you get some contracts.
Yep. And contracts, like government contracts, and also you get, like we said, partners. There's sometimes larger conglomerates that are looking for particular vendors or strategic partnerships with women-owned or minority-owned businesses. Yeah.
Great. Cool. So I love that you're helping get more equal access to knowledge and connections, but also to funds, right? Because businesses need funds to grow. But I've also seen that getting access to those funds isn't always the magic wand, by which I mean there can be some problems after you get those funds if those funds are misaligned. And maybe you're starting to all of a sudden get some strings attached with pressures to grow as fast as possible or pressures to push a little bit away from your mission so you can expand a little bit more in the mainstream market or cut your prices or whatever, right? So I've seen that happen to where, sure, the brand grows for a little while, but it's not profitable. And eventually the corporation that bought it or something, or the venture capital fund that was funding it gets tired and lets it go because it's not performing the way it wants. So it's not always, like I said, the magic wand. So I know you try to make sure there's a good fit between the brand and the money. So what is your process? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, so I think it's Simon Sinek has a book called Start With Why, right? And so for us, we're always thinking about why do you need the capital? What are you using it for? How are you going to utilize it? And then on top of that, I think understanding an entrepreneur's why makes a big difference as well, right? Like, at some point you want to create a big business. Maybe there's some M&A activity and you have a big liquidity event. But the why around how you started it, why you started it, what the purpose is, allows us to kind of align ourselves. Or if I'm making a connection to someone else, I can align you better with who I'm connecting you with. But our process in doing due diligence for investment opportunities, we start with product and then the brand and then the talent as in the people running a company before we even think about celebrity who's involved, right? It's sort of interesting. Is the product novel? Does it have a reason for being out there? Is it a copycat or is it something new that's actually solving a problem? Is the brand well thought out? Has the founder or the team running the company thought through how the brand connects with consumers, how the brand is perceived by the outside world? Who is actually running the company? All of those, that's the tertiary consideration for us. And then the last thing, just because it's so core to our thesis, is there a celebrity involved? Why and how are they involved? But a big piece of it, I mean, myself and the other GPs in our fund, we're operators at heart, right? And so when we're thinking about coming on, partnering with a founder, or partnering with a company, or investing in a brand or company, the real question for us is how can we support this operator and entrepreneur in a way that we're being additive beyond just the check that we write, right? And so sometimes, you get investors and venture capital funds that are more passive, which sometimes that's what an entrepreneur wants, right? I just need a check, give me the money, and let me go do what I have to do. Let me just go do what I got to do. I'll come back if I need more money. And in our approach, we're always thinking about beyond the check. How can we make sure that we're helping you out, right? Like how can we make sure that if you need us, we're here. If you have a question, we're here. If you need expertise or anything like that, we're here as operators. Right. One of our GPs likes to say we like to be invited guests. And so we don't want to like kind of barge in and say like you should do this, that, or the third, because that is where you get in trouble, right? That is where you get these strings attached around. I need a markup, or I need another fundraising round, or I want this company to raise capital just because it looks better on my multiple on invested capital. Right. For us, it's like we'd rather you don't raise a ton of money if you don't have to, or if you don't need to, if the business doesn't need it. We'd rather, problem solve and think about what can we do with margins? Is there a different co-packer? Is there a different supplier? Can we tweak the supply chain? We'd rather be great operational partners than just the check. And we also don't want to take that pure VC approach where it's like, raise your seed at a $10 million valuation. Cool. How quickly can you raise a Series A at a $100 million valuation and then the Series B at $1 billion? Like that is it's a waste, because a lot of times you don't get brands and companies that are focusing on the fundamentals, right? They're like, oh, there's always another round where I can get 100% of cash, as opposed to saying, let's build this thing right. Let's get profitable. Let's be efficient. Let's be effective. Let's worry about the company that we're leading here and the difference we're making, beyond like raise, sell. And at the end, like the investors are kind of steering the ship. It's kind of a little bit like the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of timeline, I do feel like that's one of the biggest struggles for a lot of growing CPG companies is you grow too slow, you miss the opportunities. You grow too fast, you don't get the fundamentals down, and you're scaling problems, not solutions often, right? Or you're growing in unprofitable ways, hoping that the profit will catch up someday, but you can end up with such massive debt that you just go through fundraising hell of just trying to pay off your debts, but never riding the ship. So,
and no one wins, right? Because everyone's diluted at the end. You've raised so much capital. You get to the finish line, everyone's like, what did we raise that money for?
Yeah, where did it all go? Especially, I've seen a lot of that with like the lab-grown meats or the plant-based meat kind of category that was getting tons of money dumped in it, right? And then it grew, and then all of a sudden they started struggling, and everyone's like, oh crap, maybe we invested a little too much too soon before the product was ready, before the technology was ready, before the companies were ready, right?
Yeah, and before the consumer was ready to some extent.
Yeah, exactly, because it does take time too. Like some companies like Manitoba Harvest, right? Like Mike Fata would be considered successful. He's had multiple 9-figure exits and everything went well, but it didn't happen in 5 years. It took like 20 years for him to like do the last round of exit that he had with that company. So he had a product that was a great idea, but he was 10, 20 years early, right? So he needed to spend the time, grow slow and strategically and operate smart enough so that he could have profits and build off of profits rather than constantly raising money. So that when the market caught up and consumers were ready for it, then he could grow fast and be ready with his supply chain, with all of his procedures, operations and stuff, so that he could scale and become number one and sell at that point. So
that's exactly right.
One thing that pops in my mind is I know a lot of funds, like a VC puts money into a company, and then to your point, they need to see that return come as big and as soon as possible, right? So I've seen some more impact-driven, sustainable funds come around and say, you know what, we're building like a 20-year fund or a 30-year fund or a 100-year fund, and we're not going to focus on speed. We're just going to find the right opportunities and give them the time they need for exactly some of the things we're talking about, either to get their operations in order or to wait till the market catches up or whatever, right? They still want to run profitable businesses, but they're not putting the pressure to say, okay, we raised this much now. You've got 3 years to raise 10 times, 10 times what we just raised. So what kind of timeline are you putting your investments on typically? Do you have a point of view on that, or do you kind of approach each opportunity differently?
Yeah, you know what? It's twofold, right? Like our fund itself is structured as a typical 7 to 10 year venture fund. Now, when we're looking at individual opportunities, we don't necessarily put them on a timeline where it's like, all right, this investment has to exit in 3 to 5 years or anything to that extent. I think a big thing for us is thinking through what the natural trajectory is for this business. And we are benefited by having a thesis that includes talent, right? Like it's undeniable that to some extent, talent-led brands are able to reach some sort of liquidity event a little bit faster. A part of it is just because, again, at the outset, you've got talent that is like pushing their community and their fan base and helping with marketing. So you kind of skip maybe a few years of marketing, of grassroots marketing, because you have, I don't know how to say it. You have someone who has 100 million Instagram followers, right? So you can kind of capture
getting eyes isn't a problem.
Just like that. Exactly. So that helps us. And so we're able to say, like, we understand that these companies we're investing in will typically have some sort of maturity event or liquidity event a little bit faster than usual. But we never go to an entrepreneur and say, like, all right, 36 months, I need a return, I need an exit. And that's in spite of our fund being a 10-year fund. So in venture, it means that sometimes you won't get a quote unquote cash out from an investment until after the fund's life cycle, right? Until beyond that 10th year. And so a lot of times, I think for us, it's about, again, backing the entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur is like, I think that the way we're growing and the way I've planned it, I can see an exit in 24, 36, 48 months. Great, we'll back you. Let's make sure we're doing it efficiently and effectively and profitably. Let's make sure we're doing the right things, checking the right boxes, whatever that is. But it would never be the reverse, where we as the investor are like, all right, our LPs need a return. Now, on the flip side, we do have a fiduciary duty to our LPs, right? And so that's the as we go into an investment, we are thinking, how acquirable is this company? Is there, again, the consumer space, excluding consumer tech, IPO is a little bit more rare, right? But so we're, for the most part, thinking about M&A activity and acquirability or PE. There are some IPOs, but as we go into investment, we're thinking, like, is this thing acquirable? Like, will someone buy this down the line? Is a question. But as we partner with founders, entrepreneurs, and the folks in our portfolio will tell you, we're always here like, what's the problem? How can we put out a fire? Do you need us to help you hold the fire hose? And where can we direct you in all those things, as opposed to like, chop, 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 we need some cash back.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing that popped into my mind is, because you have, I think you said like 14 brands right now and maybe growing, right?
Yep.
When you're looking at new investment opportunities, are you ever thinking that like maybe one of my existing brands might acquire this other brand? Like they would work really well together as a merger or something like that? Or are you always thinking we need to merge with something outside this portfolio?
It's a great question. So we're always thinking about synergistic partnerships and where two partners could work together for the benefit of each company. But we're down the line, if we're thinking like 3, 5, 10 years beyond from an M&A activity standpoint, we are thinking externally, right? So like as we vet companies, we're like, man, this would be an amazing partner for something we have in our portfolio now. Not necessarily from a merger standpoint or an acquisition standpoint, but from a collaboration standpoint. We're like two brands coming together, and you know, if we had a peanut butter company and a jelly company, we're like, man, we should do a co-branded sandwich, whatever it is. You know, I mean, like, we're always thinking of like, what's the collab, what's the co-branding opportunity, what's the co-marketing opportunity, where can we like come together and make it additive? And then down the line, if we're thinking strategics, we're thinking, you know, can we go to Coca-Cola? Like, does this company we've invested in fit in the Coca-Cola or Pepsi portfolio? Great, let's leverage some of the contacts we have there. Or is Diageo or Bayer or Unilever or Mondelez or Procter & Gamble? We're typically thinking externally for that M&A activity. But it's a great question. Like, as we look at stuff, like, man, this would be an amazing partnership with such and such in our portfolio. Let's introduce the founders and see if they like each other, or see if they see what we're seeing, right? Like, again, we're not here to steer the ship, right? So if we think this partnership and collab could be amazing, we're like, great, founder A, meet founder B. We think that there's something cool that you guys could do together. Let us know if that's the case. If not, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because there's so many fun brand partnerships and collaborations these days that I think especially if you're maybe focused on a specific category or type of product, then lots of those products in your portfolio might have great opportunities for collaboration. So I love that.
That's exactly right.
But one thing popped in my mind for that final like external exit to a big multinational or something like that. Are you, I know you said for your own investments, you're doing the start with why and figuring out, the product, brand, talent kind of questions of, is this the right fit? Do we want to jump in on this? When you go to sell one of those companies for the founder's real exit at that point, maybe they continue on, but for the exit, are you also at that point looking for fit with the company that you're selling it to? Because I've had a couple founders on the show who basically either like Seth Goldman had when Honest Tea, he sold it to Coca-Cola, but then Coca-Cola eventually dropped it because at a certain point it just wasn't growing fast enough and they wanted to focus on other things. So they kind of, Honest Tea was a mission-driven company. So basically Coca-Cola said, nah, screw the mission. If it's not making enough money, right, is my opinion. So when I interviewed Seth about that, I was like, how did that feel? And, he got the opportunity to jump back in the tea market. He was like, I would have loved to buy Honest, the brand, back, but they were keeping Honest Kids. So he launched a new brand called Just Iced Tea. So he could continue the mission. And then I just had Matt McLean with Uncle Matt's on, who exited to Dean Foods, and then Dean Foods went bankrupt and he had to buy it back. So it was kind of some of those situations where either, as a founder who has a mission, which I'm guessing a lot of yours do, and then you exit and you're like, yay, my baby has like a home where it can grow and become an adult and kind of live on its own and continue the mission or scale the mission. But then sometimes when you're in those big corporate environments, the mission gets pinched here or there, that cut corners, or maybe the founder moves on and there's nobody there really driving it and making sure the company stays on mission. And then maybe eventually it dies. So I guess I haven't asked a VC person this before. So is there any due diligence on the VC end of where you would actually turn down a big check or a great opportunity because it doesn't feel like the right fit?
Yeah, it's tough, and it's a great question for someone in our shoes, because we've got that fiduciary duty to our investors and our LPs. And so it is, I think that anytime you go to that big strategic, the pinching of the mission, as you put it, is somewhat inevitable, right? And because those conglomerates aren't necessarily in the business of mission driven, and a part of that is they almost can't be, right? And so the other difficult piece of it is, I think at some point you're trying to think through where as investor can you thread the needle a little bit, right? Like where can you've got this mission driven company, you're getting promises from acquirers that we'll keep the mission, we'll keep this, we won't change anything, X, Y, and Z. And I have, like you, I've talked to founders all the time who are like, they took the check and such strategic or acquirers kind of strip the company's soul out from it, right? And they just abandon the mission, to your point, with Honest Teas. And so it is, in my mind, as you're looking for a home for a place, it is very, 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 very tough for anything to continue to be as mission driven as it was. It's tough and borderline impossible. And then it's even harder for me as the investor to have that at the forefront of my consideration. Now, what helps us is we let the entrepreneur lead those conversations as well. And we're like, hey, here's our thought. Yes, we have to make a return. We are an investor. But at the same time, a big piece of it is sort of like, if you wanted to continue being mission driven, either you have to stay involved or you've got to kind of carve out let's start a nonprofit that's separate so that we can carve out whatever the mission was from this product and this brand.
That's cool.
Because when the acquirer takes it, they're going to take it. And so I imagine some of those, and it happens a lot of times, like some of those founders, they're selling their company. They now have the ability to actually just focus on nonprofit. And that's the amazing way to do it. But for us as an investor, we need the return. So if you're in a conversation where there's a huge check, we don't want, because in our, again, unique to our thesis to some extent, you do have instances where either the founder has to stay on as part of this exit package and this acquisition, or the talent, right? The celebrity has to kind of stay on and get their earn out, right? So everyone hears of this $1 billion George Clooney deal. It's $1 billion if he checks all the boxes after the acquisition and if he continues to do what he needs to do for Diageo. And so to some extent, there's a piece of it where it's like, yes, if you stay on and the co-founder stays on, you can kind of help steer to make sure it's at least somewhat mission driven. But as the investor, we also have to look at our LPs, right? And we're kind of like, hey, we need this return. Let's figure out a way to make sure that you are happy, you're comfortable with the home that we have for this new brand. You think that it maintains at least a little bit of its mission-driven culture, and let's go figure out what the nonprofit looks like. But
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I'll reiterate with what I started with, right? Like, I think that piece of it is inevitable, right? Because Coca-Cola's, those public companies, especially the big acquirers, almost can't afford to be as mission-driven as you were. Right, and that's why they also have the Coca-Cola Foundation, whatever those found. That's why they've also siphoned off their mission piece of it. But when it comes to an acquisition, it's like, look, we're buying vitamin water because we think it can do this velocity. that dollar per bottle that you were giving to whatever nonprofit, we can let's make it 15 cents per bottle. We can't do it. You know what I mean? And then of course we know 15 cents becomes 1 cent, and then it becomes a line on the Coca-Cola Foundation website.
And it becomes what donations?
Yeah, it's like, we never did that. And also, to some extent, they're like, we never promised we would continue that. That wasn't part of the $400 million we gave you. It wasn't part of the, if we had to continue that, we wouldn't have given you $400 million. We would have given you 150, right? So at some point, it's a really unique consideration, different perspectives for founder and for investor, because again, we never force anything on the entrepreneur, but we do have return in mind, because we've got investors ourselves who are looking at us for returns as well. And then legally, we do have that fiduciary duty to do right by them.
Right. And for the corporation buying the brands, I always think it's kind of funny when they do walk back on some of the mission, if it was a truly mission-driven brand, and that's a big part of why consumers were buying it. If you're going to walk back on that, then of course sales are going to slip, and of course you're going to eventually be like, well, we got to drop this line because we cut all these corners and now nobody wants this anymore. So
it's a tremendous,
obviously, maybe
point.
the product itself is amazing and that's all that matters, and people will buy it because the product's amazing, or maybe, like you said, the talent's the reason they buy it because they love Rihanna or whoever, and they'll buy anything she has her face attached to or name attached to, and product or mission, whatever, like they just love her. But I think some of these brands, at least in the space that I work in, the mission, their values, their commitment to doing things the right way is a big part of why they got all that growth, because people loved that and wanted a brand they could believe in. And then when it goes off and some of those pieces get peeled off bit by bit, then, you're going to lose that market. But I guess they're gambling on, we'll lose some of those people who kind of helped build this brand, that consumer demand that built the brand. But we're going to gain on this like mainstream people who didn't know about this brand and didn't know about all the mission before. So it's probably kind of a gamble for them to some degree of they have to believe it can jump the chasm to the mainstream or something like that without some of those extras.
It's funny because you get, this, it's a public story now, but you have like a company like Shea Moisture, right? Which was acquired. Now they built their bones on being a particular thing for the Black and brown community, right? And a lot of it was how they spoke to that community and what they represented for the community. And now when they were acquired, it was kind of like, great, let's take that message, make it for everyone. We're appealing to everyone, and let's roll. And they made some very big, very public advertising mistakes in how they kind of voiced and how they vocalized and just how they spoke to their new audience. And you had that original audience who was like, hey, time out. Like you're changing things. Like this is not. And then you had some people who were like, I'm not buying it anymore. And so that to your point, a lot of times you get that traction because you are mission focused and because of who you speak to and how you speak to them. And then when they end up in a landing spot, it's tough because you have a lot of very highly paid people who are thinking through strategy around, like you said, if you get some churn because you're changing things a little bit, can you afford to lose some of that original audience because you're gaining a larger audience? And there are very highly paid MBAs who kind of think through what that strategy looks like, and if the acquirer can afford to lose some of that original core. But it changes things, and it is a risk. You put it perfectly. It is a risk.
Yeah.
I love connecting people and sharing resources. So let's take a pause from this conversation for a brief intro to a podcast you might be interested in.
Are you fascinated by the world of consumer startups? Are you interested in learning more about what it takes to get a company off the ground? If so, then Worldy Unboxed is the podcast for you. Join us, Aaron and Brandon, as we sit down with founders to discuss their entrepreneurial journeys and the lessons they've learned along the way. Stick around to hear Brandon and I talk about how these conversations are changing the way we are approaching our own venture, a kids' athletic shoe company. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an aspiring entrepreneur, or someone simply interested in the startup world, this podcast is for you. Listen to Worldy Unboxed on your favorite platform now. That's WORLDIE Unboxed.
And now, back to the conversation.
I'd be interested to see, I don't know if there's any data on this, but just some data on, I don't know if corporations are willing to even like do these A/B tests, but like, hey, let's buy a mission-driven brand and let's not only keep everything about the mission, but maybe increase the impact or go further with the mission because we've got massive resources to put towards it. And then that's the A test. And then the B test would be, okay, let's take this mission-driven product and make it more of a product brand. Let's just, focus more on peel back some of the mission, but focus on the product and grow it to the mainstream and, cut whatever corners we can to get the margins right so that we can grow it in the mainstream at an affordable price and still make money. And then, 10 years later, let's look at the data. Like which one of those actually perform better, right? And that would be a super interesting study because I know there is a lot of research out of saying, certified B Corps or mission-driven companies outperform the general stock market or whatever. I don't remember all the specific data points, but I am a B Corp. So I hear this kind of data every once in a while that like, hey, these companies outperform. But if that is the case, then why do the corporations dial back on that mission stuff, especially when they have way more resources than that small company did to like commit to those things? And maybe it's just hard to scale. Like, let's say if you're fair trade, is there enough fair trade supply in the world for you to scale the brand as big as you want it? I don't know.
I'd love to see that testing. I would venture to bet that, again, if you can do it within the constraints of your business, like if there's enough fair trade or there's enough whatever, if you can actually do it, it probably would even take 10 years to see the results. You'd probably be able to do it in less than 10 years to see if you've picked up velocity and traction or if it's decreased, right? And so I'd love to see it. I would venture to bet that, again, I think it is tough to scale mission while also focusing on private. I think a lot of times those big conglomerates don't focus on multiple things well, right? So as a small company, you can focus on like our mission is the thing, but also we need to drive a profitable business. And you can kind of do those things because you're even at like 10, 20, 30, $50 million, right? But when you get to 500, 600, $700 million in revenue, you've just got to look at things differently and do things differently. But I'm with you. I'd love to see that A/B testing. I'd love to see, like, in the case of A, if you're like, keep the mission the same, but focus on other ways to make the business bigger and more profitable, right? Plug them into your supply chain, decrease their margins, make it more profitable, give them more marketing spend. Like a lot of times, mission-driven businesses don't have a big marketing budget, right? So now that they're in this big system, keep the mission, pour more money behind it, and all of those things, right? So I'm with you. Like to some extent, I understand the idea of at scale, it's tough to maintain the mission, but before you get to that like astronomical scale, there's a happy medium where it's like you've bought this company, keep the mission, pour gasoline on it, and see what happens. And I think there are ways to pour gas. Again, like a Coca-Cola buys an Honest Tea, you can drop the margins by 40% overnight, right? Like you just have a supply chain and access to vendors and deals that I don't have. Do it. And then your marketing budget is 75 times my marketing budget. Plug it in, right? Like see what you can do to make the business a bigger, more profitable business while maintaining the mission. I think that would be phenomenal.
Yeah. And maybe it's like certain types of brands have a better chance of that. Like one of the things I love about product space is the product itself can be the mission, like serving, meeting an unmet market need, right? Like serving a community that hasn't been served or creating an alternative to something that didn't exist before, like, gluten-free or organic, something like that. Like the product itself can be the mission, right? In which case, maybe the company, the corporation would be like, great. So we don't have to worry about like writing checks for every purchase. We don't have to worry about like supporting these other nonprofits or, building a community garden outside our office. Some of those things that smaller companies focus on. We can just make the best product ever. So I think.
And it's interesting because you mentioned Rihanna, right? So she's a perfect example. I think the reason she succeeded is because she realized that cosmetics companies, even the biggest cosmetics companies who could do it with their eyes closed, didn't have a diverse panoply of shades, right? They just didn't have the full rainbow of shades. And she's like, all right, I'm going to serve this audience that's been ignored for far too long. And then at some point you're like, yeah, that's normal, right? Like if you're an acquirer of Fenty Beauty, to your point, you're like, just keep doing that, right? Because now your purpose is to speak to an audience that has long been forgotten, but clearly spends a ton of money on cosmetics and should have had high quality access to just cosmetics with great ingredients in their skin shade. It's like a normal thing, right? So if you're LVMH who partners with Fenty Beauty, it's like, great, just stay the course because that's the mission. We just keep on doing that. Yeah. And I think even at that high level, they almost don't even have to think about the mission because, as you said, the product is the mission. So they're not worried about, donating $1 or planting a tree or anything like that. They're just like, keep doing what we're doing, keep building the company and growing the mission because what we're doing already is mission based.
Right. Yeah. And just keep making more shades because that is the mission.
That's it. Yeah. Just keep making more shades. Just keep, if there's another category that a particular demographic feels ignored in, maybe you move into that category and say like, great, let's do it in this space as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, with your resources, if you want to layer on, sustainable packaging or ethical sourcing or something, great. But like the main goal of that company was to get products into the market that just weren't there, people were being ignored. Right. So
that's right. And I think it's funny you mentioned, I think in cosmetics, the sustainable packaging and sustainably sourced is kind of the next frontier, right? Because nowadays you can walk into an Ulta or Sephora and it's all single-use plastic and it's all, so that's a space.
Even the ingredients themselves, I bet sometimes with a lot of those cosmetics are like pretty nasty chemicals or something like that. Maybe there could be a better, more natural source of that particular coloring.
I've seen a couple that are on the horizon trying to do it differently. So I'm excited about what's coming out. One company we're talking to in particular, I think they're going to turn some heads with their sort of sustainably sourced and sustainably packaged approach to cosmetics and beauty is pretty novel.
Yeah, love it. I could continue geeking out on that and asking you tons of questions, but I want to move on to the kind of part of your focus again is on influencer / celebrity related brands. So there's I've seen it, or it seems like it's been growing, that kind of, celebrities have resources and, a lot, both financial resources, but an audience. Yep. So it makes sense that why not pair that with some sort of product business that then gets the benefit of their name and gets, maybe is a good tool for them kind of investing some of their money to continue to grow their wealth too, right? So totally makes sense. But I know there's multiple paths into that. Sometimes you're a co-founder as the celebrity, like Honest Co or something like that, Jessica Alba. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're maybe more like using your influence, but maybe not paying as close of attention to the product and operations, like with MrBeast and some of his experiments where, he puts products out in the market that were crap, or his burger restaurant, I think he decided to close it down because the operations were just too hard to keep up with and they had product quality issues. So he wasn't in it for the product. He was just like, hey, I've got bazillions of followers. If I just sell them something, they'll go buy it. Right. So there's that path in. And then there's obviously brands who have a product that they think a celebrity would be a good endorser for. So they go out and maybe pitch those celebrities to say, hey, would you be in our ad campaign or would you do this or that? And then to your point, going out and pitching celebrities as investors. So we just had Daily Harvest on the show, who has a bunch of celebrity investors that came about kind of naturally because people celebrities just liked their products and wanted to get involved. So lots of different paths coming in. But how are you seeing, like right now in the marketplace or maybe moving into the future, what are you seeing as the most promising path for brands and celebrities or influencers like coming together and making it better with that kind of relationship or collaboration? Yeah,
I think it goes back to starting with why, and then beyond that, focusing on authenticity, right? And so I think a lot of it will have to do going forward. And I don't think there's any saturation of talent-led brands. I think that this is where the future of consumer is going. But I think that in order for talent, celebrity, influencer to be effective, it will have to be the question of why is this person involved with this company and why are they building or founding or endorsing it?
Right.
And then is it authentic? And not just is it authentic in terms of is this person attached to this brand or company or product authentic, but is the partnership authentic itself, right? Like, is it a, here, hold this thing and smile for the camera, good, go take your check and leave? Or is it a, hey, I'm here because I believe in this mission, I use this product, I like this product, I put my own cash into it, and I want people involved, right? So that's where you get like the Jessica Alba who's like, I'm a new mom, I can't find any products that are suitable for my kids or that I would like. I'm just going to create it myself and let's go and build something. And those things work because of the authenticity and because of the messaging and the storytelling behind it. And so I think that that's the way of the future. I think endorsements, there's a place for them. There's a place for them, but I think that place is shrinking because you get a lot of talent nowadays in spaces where they have the leverage saying, pay me in equity, right? Like, I don't need a check. I'm good. Give me some points of equity and I will actually link arms with you and help you build this thing into the future. And so that authenticity, part of the authenticity is the talent being along for the ride for the long haul and not just a single campaign shoot or a single photo shoot and then riding off into the sunset. It's like, this is a 2, 3, 10, 15-year journey. Let's go build something that can be impactful, that can be noteworthy, that can turn heads, that can hopefully down the line make us a lot of money. But that also speaks to me and speaks to my community, my fan base in a meaningful way. And I think those are the necessary considerations in order to win in this space nowadays.
And I love that you're saying that too, because as a branding person, that's what I do is I design brands and apply them to packaging, websites, et cetera. But as a branding person, that's speaking to me because that authenticity and kind of fit is all about branding, right? Like, does the celebrity brand, does this product even make sense in their lifestyle? Let's just say they're a teetotaler or something, like they don't drink. And they're endorsing a vodka brand, like, or something like that. That just doesn't make sense, right? Or are they promoting some like baseball bats and they've never played a day of baseball in their life? You know, like there's things like that that just doesn't make sense. Whereas to your point with like Rihanna and the cosmetics company, it makes total sense. She uses makeup. She probably had a hard time finding the right shades. Therefore, connect the dots and it makes total sense, right? So there's good fits and there's bad fits. And maybe that's part of what MrBeast's problem was with the burgers or chocolate bars or whatever. Is like, is he even a chocolate bar consumer? Probably not. If he was, he would have made a better chocolate bar, right? But he just like produced the cheapest thing possible and slapped his name on it. Now he just reformulated. I've heard, so maybe it's better now. But so that, and it all just goes back to the brand. So like the brand of the product, like, right? What does that brand stand for? And then the brand of the celebrity. And if those two things work well together, then you've probably got a fit.
Yep, that's exactly right. And sometimes you need someone to translate the celebrity's brand, the company's brand, and to make them fit, right? Because a lot of times, entrepreneur A doesn't know how to speak to or leverage the brand of celebrity B, and they don't kind of work well together. So it might be an agent or a manager or someone like myself in the middle who's like, hey, this is what this celebrity's brand is. This is what their demographic and their fan base is looking for. Here's how it fits with your company, but here's what the messaging should look like, right? Like, here's how brand to brand, when you come together, here's how that messaging should be disseminated to fans and to consumers. Here's what the story should be. Here are the beats that you want to hit. Sometimes you're right. Like, it is a branding and storytelling need that people don't really think through a lot of times.
Right. And are you seeing right now that maybe the majority of influencers or celebrities are wanting to come on as some sort of co-founder or have some sort of role within the company? Or are they more wanting to say like, hey, look, I've got an audience. I really like your product. I'll help promote it and I'll get some equity or whatever in exchange for that. But, leave the operations to those other folks. Like, what are you seeing as more common?
I'll say this. I think generally speaking, the most success you have is when the talent is not so intimately involved in operations, right? It doesn't mean like, and I know folks who work with The Rock. He's and Kevin Hart's another one. They're on calls on a weekly basis with their team. How's it going? What are we doing? Where do you need me to apply myself so that I can help? It doesn't mean that they're in supply chain conversations. It doesn't mean they are talking to vendors sometimes, but still, like, it doesn't mean that they're looking at store shelves and looking at how things appear on store shelves. But so I find a lot of talent are smart enough to leave the operations to the operators, right? You've got a great CEO, a great sales team, a great supply chain manager, all those people. Let the actual consumer and CPG people do what they've done. Sometimes you get really, really experienced people who come to bear on behalf of a celebrity brand.
Right.
But I also do find that talent now want to be more involved, right? It's not just the endorsement. It's not just let me post about it every now and then. It's about like let me hear how it's going. I've got a team. I'm letting my team do what they have to do, but I at least want to know like this thing that we're building together as a team and as a partnership. How's it going? Where can I help? What do you need my help with? And so on and so forth. Yeah. So talent is getting more intimately involved. They're becoming more entrepreneurial. They're getting a lot smarter. They also are starting to understand like their own limitations, right? You, movie star, don't need to be concerned with the sales call with the small mom and pop grocery store, but you, movie star, when it comes to like storytelling and branding and marketing, that's where we need you. And then, yeah, there are instances where it's like, please show up to the mom and pop grocery store because that's it's helpful from a branding and storytelling perspective. Yeah. But to some extent, it's like, do what you got to do. Focus on throwing touchdown passes or whatever it is, and then we'll kind of fill you in as needed. But yeah, I find talent. They want to be involved. They want to be in the know. They want to build. They want to be entrepreneurial. They understand the value of them applying themselves now, but they also understand the value of letting the pros do what they do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's probably just maybe even take a general slice of the public and what percentage of those actually want to be a operator or entrepreneur. It's probably similar with celebrities, right? Like there's probably only a certain percentage of them that want to like dive in and launch the company or show up at all the demos or be touring the factories or whatever. And then most of them are just like, hey, I'm going to continue doing what I do and, help in whatever way I can, but I don't want to get, too caught in the weeds because it's just not what interests them or it's not their skill set.
That's it. Or they don't have the time or like mental bandwidth to focus on it, right? Like at some point, if you are an NFL defensive end and you're like, or a wide receiver, like I got to focus on this playbook. I know my playbook is this thick. I've got, I don't know, their off season where they can rest is like 2.5 months long, right? Before you get into training camp and OTAs and all that stuff, right? So they're like, I want to lean in, I want to be informed, but when I'm in season, I'm focused on, sacking the quarterback or whatever it is. And same like movie stars are the same, right? They're like, I got this new role, I've got to be in it to, and so at some point I think they want to be entrepreneurial, but like you said, they a lot of times they don't have the bandwidth or the time or the wherewithal to do all like everything at once. Then it's why someone like The Rock, he's all in on everything he does. But, when he's got that like, all right, I need 30 minutes, update me on Terramana. What are we doing? What's the body count? What's the velocity? Cool. Next. And then he can like figure out, I got a movie role. I got to remember my lines. I got this promotional tour. I've got, he's now back in on WWE. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so sometimes if your profession is being a professional athlete, that has to be your focus.
Right.
And then the other piece of it is, it doesn't mean you don't want to be intimately involved. It doesn't mean you're not. It's just that like you can't be as involved as you would be if you were just CEO, quote unquote, Joe Schmo.
Right.
CEO Joe Schmo who's like, my life is running this company for and with The Rock.
Right. Like they don't all want to, or if you've got a few other successful careers, you don't necessarily have the bandwidth to now commit 60 hours a week to like just being a CEO of this growing company. So yeah.
Right. Exactly. Nor should you. Nor should you.
You got other things. Yeah. Use your talents.
Yeah.
Like there's a book called The Big Leap where he talks about focusing on your zone of genius, like the thing that you can uniquely do. You're called to do it. You're great at it. You are passionate about it. You can just like sit at the desk or wherever and like just do it for hours. Time flies, right? And then you've got all these other tasks in your day-to-day job or your business that you have to do where you're like, this is a slog. It's distracting me from other things.
Yeah.
I could pay somebody to do this. So he just talks about like finding ways to spend more time in your zone of genius. So like, again, if you're an actor and that's your zone of genius, why are you sitting here looking over P&Ls or calling vendors or something, right? It doesn't make sense.
Yep. Especially when you're looking at the P&Ls and it's like a foreign language to you when you look at it. Like, I don't even know why I'm looking at this.
Is this
Let me get back to my
good? Is
script.
this number bad?
Right, exactly. What's the red, the parentheses mean? Like, is that up or down, right? Like,
Yeah, totally.
Why?
Great. And I know we're short on time here, and you've got too many brands to mention them all, but let's name some names, because we've talked a lot about what you do, but not necessarily, let's paint a more concrete picture. Like, what are some of the more recent or maybe more well-known brands that you've invested in?
Yeah. Let's see. So we've got a gin brand co-founded by Emma Watson and her brother, Alex. Originally launched in the UK, just launched in the US on June 27th. And
nice.
So just came stateside. It's exactly. So it's a tremendous gin brand. They're in 18 countries now and growing. We've got a pet care brand from Kaylee Kuko. She's of course in The Big Bang Theory and Flight Attendant and a whole host of other things. But it's not necessarily pet food or pet nutrition. It is at the moment pet care in particular. So it's a very particular niche that's doing really well.
Yeah.
Sienna Naturals, co-founded by Issa Rae. And then we have a host of brands that they might not have talent yet, and we're thinking through, do we bring talent in? How do we bring talent in? We've got a canned wine company called Maker Wine. We have a diaper brand called Kudos that's doing tremendously well. It's D2C at the moment and launching with a major retailer in the fall. We have the first plant-based rehydration brand called Berry Organics. And so Berry Light, think of it as a Pedialyte competitor, but entirely plant-based.
Nice.
And that one is also doing really well. You can find it in Sprouts, Whole Foods, Target, but without to the point of your company, your podcast, Berry Light in particular is about having a better product, right? You're like, you don't want the colors or the chemicals or the additives. It's entirely plant-based. And why shouldn't you have a plant-based version of a kid's hydration drink, right? And so, yeah. And then, we've got. I'm sure that there are some founders who are gonna nudge me or kick me under the table.
I'd be like, why didn't you mention me? I was trying to let you off the hook. I know we don't have time to talk about all of them.
We've got a hard kombucha company called Giant that's doing really well.
I've seen that one.
We've got a long list. Really, for us, it's just partnering with great entrepreneurs. A lot of times, and most often, those entrepreneurs are also great celebrities. And sometimes we don't have that celebrity, and we're thinking about, is there someone we can partner with to, again, authentically tell this story?
Yeah, that makes sense. I seem to remember, I don't think I saw a list of the companies you're invested in on your website, but is there somewhere, is it on the website?
Not yet. Okay. But should be soon.
Okay. Well, when it is up, where should people go to find out more about what you do and who you're invested in?
Yeah, they can just head to freedomtrail.capital. And then if folks have great idea, great product, they have a talent-led brand already, or they're thinking that their brand should partner with talent, they can shoot me a line at Samyr, Samyr, at freedomtrail.capital. But yeah, website is just freedomtrail.capital.
Love it. Well, to do a quick wrap up, I'd like to dive into some rapid round to get to know you a little bit more personally.
Let's do it.
What's a CPG product you're loving right now that you're not invested in?
It's a good one. That's funny. I've got coffee here in my coffee. When I do drink coffee, I usually have a mushroom blend or like a mushroom powder. So I've been a big fan of functional mushrooms for some time now. I think that there's a couple of brands out there.
Yeah.
There's a couple of brands we've even looked at, but we haven't pulled the trigger yet. So, things like a lion's mane and a reishi and ashwagandha and a couple of things. So I'd say the functional mushroom space, but then more broadly, adaptogens and nootropics and, things that are better for you and really health focused. We don't have a supplement investment yet. We definitely don't have a mushroom supplement yet. And I use mushrooms on a pretty regular basis. I'd say daily, really. Not like mind altering mushrooms, but racial lines, man. So sometimes you gotta draw that line for people.
Right. Yeah. It's becoming less necessary, but yeah, I still also see some like functional mushroom supplements come out to the market with like rainbow vibes on it, and people are like, wait a minute, which kind of mushroom is that? So
exactly. Like, no,
be careful with your branding.
But there you go. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I've been using a lot of mushrooms lately too. So I'll name a name. So I've been using Ohm, just because I like their kind of master blend, but I've sampled a few different.
That is what I have in this coffee right here.
Nice. And I'm in the hometown of Host Defense as well, because I'm in Olympia, Washington. Nice. So I try to use theirs, but I usually can't find like the brain function one in the co-op that I shop at, and that's the one I want typically. So I need to maybe just go to their website, but the Ohm is usually available on shelf, so I grabbed that.
I'm the same way. I pick up my own master blend either from Sprouts or Whole Foods, whoever has the sale of the week.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so as a former Olympian, what lesson from sports have you brought into business?
Oh, it's a good one. I think this is it's one lesson, but there's kind of multiple branches of it, but it's really just about perseverance and determination, right? So at some point as an entrepreneur, you really do have to, you can't let your highs be too high, your valleys too low, and you've got to push through. You've got to be determined. You got to keep climbing, especially like as an Olympian, right? You're thinking through, did I qualify? Did I jump far enough? Did I win the competition? What happens? And you've got setbacks, you've got injuries. And so a lot of it for me, and it's considering the path that I took as well, right? And so a lot of it is staying the course, understanding why you're doing it, what you're doing it for, and continue to march forward. And that's a big deal for us as we actively fundraise now. We kind of pound the pavement fundraising, but it's something I impart upon our portfolio companies and founders, right? It's like, let's figure out why you're doing this. Let's actually create a plan that we think is a great plan and work the plan. It doesn't mean there's not going to be setbacks. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I always tell people no one said it was going to be easy, but only that it'd be worthwhile, right? And so you gotta keep chopping wood. You gotta keep marching up the hill. Sometimes you get knocked back a step, but you gotta take 2 steps forward. A lot of that was how I got to where I ended up as an athlete. And man, the same holds true for entrepreneurs without a doubt.
Yeah. And it's almost worthwhile because it wasn't easy, right? Like when you get something easily, you're like, yeah, I got it. Like easy come, easy go, whatever. But when you worked your butt off for it, that feels so much better to have that win. And to your point, when you're running a business, it's not about, how easy things click, because you're always going to have a new challenge, whether it's a challenge with supply chain, a challenge with a pandemic, a challenge with competitors, a challenge with your own internal team, whatever. There's always challenges, right? So having that mindset of like, let's just get in there and, have a vision, have a direction we're heading, and keep going, jump over these obstacles, like clear these hurdles, et cetera. But just keep going, because if you burn out and give up too soon, you might have just quit a year before everything clicked, right? But knowing that you just got to keep going is the most important thing.
Yeah, the stories, right? Like people mining for gold and they quit 2 inches from the vein and all that stuff. And so you gotta, there's gonna be obstacles. You gotta go over, under, around, or through them, but you really gotta stay the course.
Right. I have a friend, Antoine, who during the pandemic said it's not about or at this point, it's about who can survive the longest while bleeding. That's a perfect way to put what the pandemic was like. Yeah. Okay. What's the best piece of advice you've received either recently or ever?
Oh, that's a good question. There's probably a quote I can draw, and I'm pretty big on quotes. A lot of that advice has been, again, tied to staying the course. I'm trying to think of a quote. So look, there's a favorite book of mine that I read on a very regular basis is Think and Grow Rich. Cool. More so because of the thinking part, less the grow rich part, but they're tied together. And so a part of it, and advice / favorite quote among them for me is there can be no space between what you want to happen and what you're willing to make it happen. And again, that's within the bounds of legality and fairness and all that good stuff. But really just kind of being willing to sacrifice and persevere, like we just spoke about, and being willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that you're successful and make sure that this plan, this goal that you have, this plan that you set course on, you're able to achieve it, right? And so before you wave that white flag, It is like, have you done literally everything that you can within your power to make sure that you can get to the finish line, whatever that finish line is.
Right. Yeah. Like I keep thinking more recently of like, I'm the only thing holding me back, by which I mean it's, if I am willing to grow, if I'm willing to suffer, if I'm willing to find new solutions, if I'm willing to let go of assumptions, like all that kind of stuff that can sometimes block us from making the right decisions or making quick enough decisions or delegating properly or whatever. Right. So often it's just like your willingness to dive in and do what it takes is the difference between success or failure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it, and a great way to think about it too. Right. It's like, it means that you've got this self-determination, right? Like you have the ability to make or break your success and the company that you're building in particular.
Right. Yeah. So who's an impact-driven leader you admire and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always admire what Tasunda Brown Duckett is doing. She's at TIA now, one of the few Black women CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. But before that, she was head of, I think, consumer banking at Chase, right? So she's been to heights that few women, let alone Black women, have been to. But
Nice.
sort of how she leads, and I've met with and talked to a few people who have reported to her, but how she leads with impact being a focal point, but also being personable, leveraging her emotional IQ as well as a leader, and then also just being an advocate for I think not wealth redistribution, but being an advocate for generational wealth for diverse communities, right? I mean, she did it at Chase, she's doing it at TIAA.
Nice.
What she's dealt with and had to go through to get to where she is, and then how she handles herself, how she speaks about the mission for the entity she's leading, how she interacts with her direct reports, from what I've heard, is commendable. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I love it when you find stories of people who are successful, but also successful while also uplifting others along the way and kind of like committing to
It's
like
rare.
showing up as a good person, because it gets so tiring hearing of all these like CEOs or whatever. You find out they, I don't know, have a crappy personal practices or broken relationships or, you know, like all these kind of things that they do wrong along the way in focus of kind of what we were just talking about. They'll do whatever it takes to be successful, but then a lot of times that means sacrificing everything else, like your family, your personal life, your whatever else. So I love when I find an example like this of a leader who not only is successful, but also did it the right way and kept their ethos and heart intact.
It's also clear to see, right? Like those leaders end up being revered, and all of these great leaders have a ton of interviews, right? But when you hear people mention them as a mentor, mention them for playing a role in their own ascension, you know, like, all right, that person is doing it the right way. And so, yeah, she's one. That there are a ton of others, but you're right. It's often too rare that you hear someone get to those heights and they've done so in a way that is impactful for others and helpful to others as well.
That's beautiful. Okay, last question. Since this podcast is Brands for a Better World, what does a better world mean to you?
Yeah, you know what? For me, a better world means a more equitable one, right? And so there's this illustration I've seen of the difference between like equity and equality. And so I think more equitable, it's whether wealth or opportunity or whatever that means. I think a better world is one that's more equitable, right? And so access to opportunities, access to wealth, access to information, access to relationships, right? And so it doesn't mean that equity means everyone has the same. It doesn't mean that everyone end up achieving the same heights or achieving the same things, but equitable access to those things that we started this conversation with, right? Sometimes it might just be knowledge or relationships or connections. Sometimes it's equitable access to wealth or investors or loans or whatever it is, right? And so for me, that equity plays a big part in what I view a better world going forward.
I love it, especially because the inequities in this world are a large part of what's broken that a lot of people are trying to fix right now, is because that lack of opportunity or the lack of privilege or the lack of whatever keeps people behind, not just in their own life, but generationally speaking, right? Like back to what you were talking about, generational wealth too. Like if we can switch to a more equitable world, then we give everyone a bit more of a chance to build generational wealth or to live their dream and not just be working 3 minimum wage jobs just to get by. Right. So I think that's a noble goal. And I love that you're focused on that with your career, with your business, with this VC fund. So thanks for doing what you're doing to make the world a better place.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for highlighting these stories. And it's, you hit the nail on the head. And it's funny because I mentioned that illustration, right? Like the difference between equity and equality is that sometimes the things and the access that people get is different than everyone else, right? It doesn't mean that two people have, like, I don't need the same opportunities or healthcare that someone else needs, right? And so equity means everyone has access to the healthcare, whatever it is, but what someone needs from the healthcare system is different than what I need, right? And so, but everyone has access and people are getting what they need. Some folks need a different sort of support from the banking system or education system, right? And so I think that illustration I mentioned is funny because you have, I think, 3 kids of different heights trying to peek over a fence, right? And equality means everyone gets a box of the same height. And so the shortest kid isn't able to see over the fence because they've got the same height box. But equity means you've got different boxes, but in the end, everyone is able to see over the fence. And in the illustration, they're watching a baseball game. But thanks to you for highlighting these stories, right? And so especially the idea of what a better world means to me is different than what that means to someone else. And so for you with your platform, sharing these different stories and these different glimpses of what a better world is tremendous.
Awesome. Love it. Well, appreciate you carving out the time, and thanks again. Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Samyr or his firm, go to freedomtrail.capital. If you like this show, remember to help us grow by liking, reviewing, and sharing. And if you're new here, don't forget we have over 100 episodes in the archive. Some might be called Evolve CPG, but it's the same show, so dig in for more goodness. If you consider yourself an impact-driven professional, join me over at impactdriven.community, where we're supporting each other's growth as impact leaders.